All right. We're on the air. So just
Okay.
look at those, see if it reminds you of anything you want to say.
Well, they're all big points in my memory, but I don't know what's special about what I say down there. Yeah, that's just a picture from a training group at Vero Beach during World War II.
Okay. Why don't you hit the right arrow key there?
And that's my night fighter group aboard the Yorktown.
That is on the Yorktown itself.
Yeah, that was on the
That
Yorktown
was,
itself.
Now you call it a group, not a squadron, but is that part of
No,
a squadron?
We as a group, night fighter group. Let's see, what was our number? We had a number, night fighter group so and so, but I can't remember the number because we never used that. We were part or attached to day fighter squadron of VF-88. That's the main nomenclature there. They were a standard Navy squadron, fighter squadron, and night fighter groups were attached. And I've told you before that as night fighter group attached, we were supposed to supply the radar-equipped capability. Our airplanes had the radar on the wing, on the right wing, and the other day fighters did not have. But there was also the Bonhomme Richard carrier. That was the Yorktown, and the Bonhomme Richard carrier was one of the fifth carrier in our task group 58, which had all night fighter equipment and personnel. And turned out as the operations went through the war that all the real night operations were assigned to the Bonhomme Richard, so they would get something to do. So we never flew really as night operations because of that proximity of the Bonhomme Richard.
Yeah.
So we did all our flying just as regular day fighter attachments, operations to the day fighter group.
That reminds me of something I'm going to ask you. I won't put this on the video. I'll cut this off. But just for my own information, I was watching the videos from last time, and you were saying about how you'd shot down 2 planes at night, Bettys. Does that mean you shot the other 5 were shot down during the daytime?
Yes.
Okay. So those 2 Bettys were at nighttime, and 5 were during the day.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I want to hit the right arrow and go to the next picture.
That's when I was working at Lockheed in the 1960 period, flying a B-47 over Lake Altoona near Marietta, Georgia, where the Lockheed plant was. And that was just a publicity shot for the Lockheed to advertise the B-47 as their product, so to speak.
And what's the name of that lake?
Altoona Lake.
Altoona Lake.
So it was a local picture, you might say, something to show you Lockheed is down here working with Georgia in this place.
That's not the lake that was by, the company you work for, the RC company?
Lanier?
Lanier.
No.
That's not Lanier Lake.
There are 2 lakes worthy of the real name. There are a few other lakes in Georgia, and some pretty big lakes on Chattanooga River, but there are 2 lakes in Georgia that anybody knows about. Georgia was Lake Lanier and Lake Altoona.
Okay.
This is Altoona. It was 20 miles north of Marietta, where I lived and where Lockheed was, and that makes it 40 miles north of Atlanta.
Okay. There, that's better. All right, what's the next one? Let's see here.
That's a C5, and I think that's the first landing of the C5. Yes, I said here, Leo Sullivan was the pilot. The first flight of the C5 after being produced there at Marietta, Georgia, at Lockheed plant. It was the biggest aircraft project that ever occurred, I think, at that time, cost-wise and airplane-wise too. At that time, the C5 was the biggest airplane in the world. Of course, since then, the Russians have built not only the same size airplane, looks just like it, but they built a one almost half again as big with 6 engines across the wings. It looks just the same, just got more engines, and it's actually much bigger.
Okay, let's go to the next one. That's some guys at Parkair.
That's the guys at Parkair, the crew at Parkair, which was the Grassfields Airport of Marietta. Same town, same place. And that's everybody there. And the day was, because I said on here, because the airplanes, all our airplanes there are Champs, and the Stinson and the Super Cruiser had all been repainted Stinson maroon and had this logo of Parkair Northside Atlanta written on them.
You look mighty young there.
Everybody in that picture is young, really young. Yep. They're all, this guy right here was a photographer that Pete was the owner of this airport, Pete Davison, and this guy was a friend of his and did a lot of picture taking for him. But everybody else is working there. I don't know the black guy's name. That's me, and that's Ray Early, whose nickname was Rabbit Early. He killed himself. Everybody thought it was suicide, but it wasn't. He had his pickup and was going rabbit hunting and reached in his car from the right door and picked up his rifle by the barrel and drug it out and somehow triggered the trigger and had the barrel pointed right to him and killed himself very shortly after this picture was made. And as I said, that's Pete, and this is Charlie Evans, who was a very rich young man out of Atlanta and had a Super Cruiser at the field and loved to fly. And this is Bobby Moore, who was the mechanic there and learned to fly there, taught him to fly. And he was kind of reminded me of my son John. He was a good pilot, but he just didn't have a sense of caution, I guess. He later developed it and went on to a long career of flying, so he did good. But while he was there at Parkair in the first 2 years, he had about half a dozen crashes.
Your ability to recall these names is astounding to me, because if I was shown some pictures of 1960 or so when I was doing that kind of stuff, I'm not sure I could pull those names out of a hat like you're doing.
Well, if you were involved as I was with those, each one of those persons, a lot of big degree-wise, it's easy enough. Bobby turned out to be a very good friend, and he eventually moved to back to his hometown, Arkansas, after the war. He was a mechanic during the war, and he went back to Arkansas and got a job at a chicken farm, selling baby chicks all over the world. And he had a hangar there. He was the only person there, and he was the pilot and the mechanic for a hangar and 5 airplanes, two Beech. Can't remember the little Beech twin name.
Baron, the Baron.
No, the one below that. But like a Baron, and 2 of those, and 3 Bonanzas. And he took care of all of them and flew them all. And he would take they would incubate these baby chicks of a special quality apparently, and put them in boxes and put them on an airplane and fly them to San Francisco or New York. Anyway, they had to be delivered on the airline. They had 1 day to get on an airline after they were hatched. So he had to get on the airplane and go, and he did all that for quite a few years. He was there, still working there and doing that when I went to Tulsa with Gene and the Jetstar. So it wasn't very far from Tulsa over into Arkansas. I went over there and visited him quite frequently and flew the Super Cruiser that I bought from Charlie Evans to go over there and see Bobby Moore. And this guy, Don Ornbaum, when I went to Florida, California, Don had become a firefighter, flying these airplanes to drop things on fires up in the middle of the California Valley. I've forgotten the airport name up there where they were flying from, but went up there to renew acquaintance with him when I was in California. Had been quite a few years after Parkair. He was only Parkair for a year or so, but he was an amazing fella, and he came out there and worked for me as an instructor there for that year.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
That's Parkair Airport. 2 runways, north-south, and the east-west runway, which is 2,000 feet.
Are those paved?
No, not paved, just mowed grass all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There was a paved taxiway that ran from right there, with the end of the runway was there, but the taxiway only went to there and all the way along to there. You can see where it stopped. And that gave all-weather access to the runway. The runway was pretty well crowned and topsoil, so it didn't get too wet.
Mm-hmm.
So it helped a lot to have that paved taxiway. And all the hangars out there that were built with the airport. And then the tie-down area right here is where Red Harwell, in that picture we looked at a little while ago, where I met him, was down there, went down there one day, and he had an old Fairchild 24, and he and his 2 sons, young kids, 2 and 4 years old, were down there working that old Fairchild. So that's where I met his acquaintance. We stayed friends for a long time. Flew that old Fairchild with him a lot.
Next.
And that's-
Maybe I should have a clicker and go or something like that for the next slide.
Say that?
I said I should have a clicker and go
Oh,
for
yeah.
the next slide.
That's like Parkair, the day the what I call the tornado came through. It was invisible, but it was obviously a little circular, like a dust devil thing came through. And these 2 airplanes were sitting wheels up, wheels on the ground, right where they are. And when this came through, they both lifted up and got 50 to 100 feet high, and they were just going round and round, right side up. And when they got up there, then that wind quit somehow, and they turned over and fell just like that, right there.
A Champ, and what is the other one?
There's a Waco set in,
Oh yeah, right.
brace there. Waco cabin, owned by a fellow named Chesser. And my friend Frank Dosser is standing right there. Now, I don't know who this one is.
Let's go to the next one.
And, oh, I won't tell you though
Okay,
about
okay.
this airplane and Frank.
All right.
There were about 10 of us in the office when this wind came up. We were there, and there was dead calm and no indication of any wind at all. And all of a sudden, somebody looked out and saw the leaves beginning a little bit and said, "What's that?" And we looked, and all of a sudden, we heard this wind, and we ran to the airplanes. There was another airplane somewhere up the line. I can't see it up in there. And 9 of us went to that one, and Frank went to this one by himself, which was down here, about 100 feet away. And he grabbed the strut, and when the wind lifted it off the ground, he grabbed it just as it lifted off, and he hung on till he was about, I'd say, 50 feet high. It looked like to me he was way up, and everybody yelled at him to let go. And he was just panicked, I guess, by lifting off, and he was holding on for dear life. He let go, thank goodness, because it went a lot higher, and came down with a bang. He didn't get hurt, thank goodness.
Wow.
A close call, though. And that was the demise for the moment of one of our champs. I'm looking for the number on that one. I can't remember it. I think we fixed it though. That's the paint they had on them new from the factory,
Yeah.
and we painted them all solid maroon later, as that Stinson showed.
Mhm.
Okay, that's my Aeronca low wing LB that I owned up in New Jersey.
And the B stands for what kind of engine?
Le Blonde, I guess, as opposed to Warner. I think Warner and Le Blonde were the two.
Yeah. The one at the museum's an LC because it has a Continental in it.
Is it a Continental engine?
I don't know. It's an LC.
I don't think it has Continental engine. I think it has the Warner engine.
Okay.
LC was just the progression indication.
Okay. I thought it stood for the engine.
No.
So was that a good flyer?
Oh yeah, it was fine. I didn't suppose I flew it more than two.
Is this the one that had the barn door flaps?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Between the 2 landing gear pairings, there was the whole bottom of the fuselage was a big, looked like a 4x8 piece of plywood. It was hinged at the front and came down just like that, straight down. And it really slowed it down. But without that, that was such a nice tapered, streamlined section wing that thing would float. If you'd come over the end of a short runway at 5 miles an hour over stall speed, you'd still be doing 5 miles an hour at the other end. it just wouldn't slow down.
Yeah.
So that big old barn door thing really helped slow it down, just what it needed.
It's amazing that Aeronca thought that would originally fly with their little, what was it, 119 engine? The
Oh.
two-cylinder 119 that they made?
The first engine was 37 horsepower.
Yeah, that's the one.
Same
It's
as
on the
E2.
C3. There's two of them on the C3 at Wham.
I don't think they ever tried to fly this airplane with that.
In the Aeronca book I have, it shows them that was the first thing they tried, but it wouldn't fly. So then they went to a
I remember
bigger
that.
engine.
Yeah, well, I would say they were right. They wouldn't fly. Another thing about this airplane was very interesting. I bought it in upstate New York. I was living in New Jersey, Atlantic City at the time. And I went up to upstate, corresponded through a trade plane ad, and talked to the fellow and decided to go look at it, and flew up there to pick it up and buy it. And the guy that owned it wasn't there, but another guy was there. And he said he was a friend and he'd flown it one time. He wasn't a pilot, but he could show me all the while I wanted to know about it. So went all around it and everything, and found that the only thing I didn't understand was on the right side of the fuselage in the cockpit right here, there was an inspection cover, a little round plate that's used around to let you see in, and you took that cover off, and there was a fuel line vertical running through there, and a valve on it. The valve had 4 positions, but didn't have any label on anything. So I asked this guy which way was on and off, and he didn't know. So I said, well, I don't worry about it. This airplane had wing tanks and a header tank with it, just like a Cub, had a wire sticking up there for the header tank, and it was full of gas. I could tell that, so I started off for home with it, and then the header tank went down, and I figured out finally that I wasn't going to get home with it. It was going down too fast, and I tried to move that valve, and I tried where it wasn't feeding the header tank from the wing, obviously, because the header was going down. So I changed position to another position and waited a little while, and it kept going down. I tried another position, kept going down. I tried a third position, kept going down, and by then the engine quit, and I had a forced landing that I've told you about before. And after I landed and stopped, I changed the valve to the 4th position and pumped the hand pump, and sure enough I heard fuel running. That 4th position is where the only place it would feed.
It had a little wobble pump to pump it back up into the gravity feed.
It had an engine-driven pump for normal flying, but on the ground when the engine stopped, the wobble pump was there, and
So the wing tanks never went into the engine; they went into the gravity feed.
That's
tank.
right. That's the way the system worked. For CG purposes, I guess, as much as anything, the wing tanks kept the header tank full, and the header tank fed the engine.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, another thing about all the engines of those days had to have a fuel height, a header height over the carburetor to provide proper gravity feed to the carburetor, and so it had to go to the header tank first.
My Hupmobile works the same way. It has a vacuum chamber that's high on the firewall that sucks fuel from behind, and then it's gravity feed into the carburetor.
That way you can handle various loads of fuel to pull up there,
Yeah.
and have a constant weight and gravity aid for the engine. I guess a good fuel system has been used a lot.
Yeah.
Another thing about this airplane was when I got back with it, I noted that the tail wheel looked pretty flat. Or maybe I noted it when I was buying it. I don't know. I believe I did notice it when I bought it. It was kind of low, and so I tried to get some air into it and had a place on the side to take the cover off and find the valve stem. So I took it off, and there was no valve stem in there. So I just put the cover back and went home with it because it wasn't dead flat. It was just low. And when I got home and finally took the tail wheel off the airplane and looked, took the tire off the wheel, there was no air in the tire, only rags. It was just stuffed with cloth.
Yeah, you told me about that. Yeah.
And been flying it that way, I guess. So I just put another rag in it and put it back on. Those were a little more carefree days than today.
Yeah. And then you put a thing on the side that told how many rags it needed, right?
Maybe so. Yeah. But that was a very nice airplane. I enjoyed flying it, but I don't know that anything about it. I can't say anything about its flying characteristics other than it was very clean and wanted to float on landing. And that's what that barn door was for.
Yeah. Alrighty.
I wish I'd kept that airplane. It'd be pretty valuable today, like the one out of the museum.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the old bamboo bumper, UC78. And no, I think that's me standing by it.
Yeah, it is.
I started to say it was Frank. I hope I don't look like Frank.
Anything noteworthy about that one? Was that another basket case when you got it?
No, I bought that in presumably flying condition, and it did fly, so it was flying condition, but it was pretty ready up in New Jersey, same place I had the Aeronca. And we also had a J5 and a fleet up there. We had 4 airplanes. A fellow named Jack Stevenson, who was in the Navy with me, and I bought all those together. And when I left Atlantic City to go back home, when I got let out of the Navy then, why, we flipped coins to see who got what, and Jack got the Aeronca and the fleet, and I got the bamboo bomber and the J5. And so I had to fly back to Georgia. I'd already moved the family back, so I can't remember. I must have gotten a ride on a Navy airplane or something, got back up there to flying back to Georgia. And I remembered the thing about the UC78 was that the fabric on the wings, which was linen fabric back in those World War II days, heavier but stronger. The finish, the paint had just about gone from it, and it was slack and not even waterproof, you might say. Very porous. And when you take off, as you roll down the runway, if you look out, you see the lift begin to pull on the wing, while all of this loose fabric between every rib would blow up like this, just lift up. And you can see these big bulges as the lift produced on the wing. Pretty scary, but I got it back to Georgia that way.
Let me hit stop here for a minute.